Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, both the officer and the suspect in a recent officer-involved shooting and death in Hoopa have now been identified. We'll bring you those details shortly. Also, continuing our conversation on affordable housing, we interview local housing advocate Lulu Mickelson about recent changes in state law and whether these reforms will make a difference in the supply of housing in California. Coming up now on Headline Humboldt. Top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. Last week we spoke with Nezzy Wade from AHA Humboldt and got a sense of the need we have in Humboldt County for an expanded spectrum of housing. In particularly, we discussed the kind of housing that allows people on the economic fringes to find security and build a future, a model that some folks have deployed to good effect elsewhere. This week, we're continuing this important conversation and again trying to answer the question whether recent changes to state environmental standards around affordable housing projects will bring about the increase in supply that we desperately need. We'll speak with local housing advocate Lulu Mickelson shortly to flesh this issue out. A recent story released by the news organization Cal Matters indicates that a patchwork of current and former legislation will provide for the construction of new housing across the income spectrum. The report indicates that affordable housing projects in most places and most of the time may soon be exempt from many of the issues that currently hold such projects up, including challenges under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. To qualify, projects would have to be located in dense urban areas, set aside each unit for someone earning less than 80% of the area median income, and abide by stricter labor standards, among other requirements. How much of an impact might this have? Could it finally result in the slowing and ultimate reversal of the housing prices spike we've all suffered through these past decades? We'll do our best to find out. But first, the headlines. The man who was shot and killed by a California Highway Patrol officer in Hoopa last Sunday, September 17th, was identified this week as William Burl Nelson, of 43, of Hoopa. A forensic autopsy concluded that Nelson died of a gunshot wound to the chest. The California Highway Patrol officer who fired the fatal shots has been named as Neil Johnson. He is the CHP officer posted to Willow Creek. At around 7:30 a.m. that morning, Officer Nelson and a sheriff's deputy were watching traffic on State Route 96 when they spotted a Volkswagen Jetta sporting a broken windshield. They also alleged that the driver was not wearing his seatbelt and that some lights on the car were not working. When the CHP officer tried to make a stop, the Jetta refused to yield and the officer began his pursuit. The deputy followed. Only a quarter mile away, the Jetta pulled out into a turnout and Nelson reportedly fled the vehicle and took off down a nearby trail into the woods. There was a foot chase that lasted for some 200 yards, and then the two got into a violent altercation. Nelson ultimately suffered several gunshot wounds and died at the scene. During their preliminary investigation, investigators determined Nelson had no weapons on his person, but they later found a loaded firearm in the vehicle. The incident is being investigated by the Humboldt County Critical Incident Response Team and the State Department of Justice. Upon completion of the investigation, the state DOJ will submit its finding to Attorney General Rob Bonta for a determination on whether the shooting was justified. Eureka Police announced this week that they have arrested a suspect in the murder of 27-year-old Holland Elbick of Eureka. After proclaiming last week that they were seeking 20-year-old Destiny Ramey of Eureka on suspicion of homicide, she turned herself into the Humboldt County Correctional Facility, where she was booked on murder charges. Her bail was set at $750,000. According to Eureka Police, at around 6:30 p.m. on August 2nd, officers with the Eureka Police Department responded to a West Sonoma Street address after a call reporting a fight. Upon arriving, officers found 27-year-old Holland Elbick in medical distress with multiple stab wounds. The altercation occurred between Elbick, roommate Destiny Ramey, and a male friend of Ramey. If you're like me and have in the past come very close to crashing into an elk while driving up U.S. Highway 101, this next story will come as welcome news. A new study by Cal Poly Humboldt will help determine if the electronic detection of elk near local highways might help protect both the massive animals and human drivers. Wildlife professor Michaela Zickman-Gunther and several of her students are particularly focused on a stretch of highway near Stone Lagoon, about 30 miles north of Arcata. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife has designated this spot as an area of concern for traffic collisions with wildlife. It's also the spot where my wife and I came to a screeching halt some 28 years ago when a snorting elk suddenly appeared in the road, staring us down and refusing to budge. The researchers will try to determine if warning signs installed along the highway might help stop collisions. Collared animals would trigger lights on the signs and let approaching drivers know that the elk are close. While the researchers will be putting collars on elk, their study will also focus on the behavior of humans and on developing signs that stand out from the normal scenery. The idea is similar to pedestrian crossing signage that has been adopted across California in the last decade, and the study hopes to determine if such signs actually get people to slow down. I'm here with Lulu Mickelson. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're returning to the show. You were here
Yes.
once before,
Yes.
and you gave us an education at the time on affordable housing.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm kind of looking to redo some of that
Great.
education. So basically what I've heard is that there has been some reforms in state law that have changed how CEQA will be enforced on affordable housing projects. And there's a lot of other legislation sort of going around that subject. And that all told, the idea is to sort of grease the sleds for affordable housing projects in the future and kind of remove a lot of the barriers that have held things up. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about yourself.
Okay.
You're a housing advocate, affordable housing advocate. Can you describe for us what you do and why you think the issue is important?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had about 10 years of experience working in local governments around economic development and housing policy. And I actually arrived at housing after working on a lot of different issues, thinking about how do we support neighborhoods and individuals facing, challenges around poverty? How do we create communities where everyone thrives? And it kept bringing me back to housing, because as we know, housing is at the center of being able to live a happy and thriving life and to have healthy communities that are inclusive. We need affordable housing. And so now I work a lot with local nonprofits around thinking about affordable housing and thinking about how to bring community voice into making decisions around housing and land use. And so it's a real pleasure to be here and talk a little bit about that experience. And I think, we share this because based on our last conversation, that we know that without affordable housing, you really can't build a thriving and healthy life. And I'm happy to share some of the anecdotes that I'm hearing from folks locally, from my own experience, in terms of really thinking about how housing is so central to the communities that we want to build.
Yeah, how do you think it's holding people back? It's across the age range, but there's a lot of young families I know that are struggling with this issue because rents are really high, and if you want to get into the retail market, that's just, beyond thinking for a lot of folks. So how is it holding people up, do you think? Absolutely.
I think right now, the reality is that unless you have a lot of money or intergenerational wealth, it's very hard to feel stable in your housing, right? You're feeling like you can't buy in the market, you're a renter, that feels precarious as rents go up. And so what that means is that people are making really hard trade-off decisions. They don't have a lot of choice around housing. They feel stuck. And what that looks like in our local community is that people end up living really far away from where they work. So I have spoken to workers who commute 2 hours a day just to be a nurse or a teacher somewhere because the housing in that area is not affordable for them, or they're kind of stuck in a housing situation. They don't feel like they have the means to leave. And so now with rising gas prices, that's becoming really challenging for folks. And also it's adding emissions to our area. That's not the type of, local kind of commute we want people to have, because we don't want people to be in their car for hours. It has health impacts, it has environmental impacts, and financial impacts for that family.
Yeah, and so, it doesn't make people happy to be driving around in
No, or people are compromising on quality. So they're choosing housing locally that has mold or other health conditions. They're having to move a lot, which is creating instability for their family. So, there's so many ways in which housing can really create this sort of ripple effect in your life. And so we see this all the time where, we talk about homelessness and housing insecurity. And I want to talk a little bit more about that housing insecurity piece, because I think we see what street homelessness looks like. And that's, really important. A lot of those folks are having compounding issues. Sometimes they had trauma before becoming homeless. Sometimes being homeless has created trauma for them. And then that's sort of the tip of the iceberg. There's all these people in our community that are not visibly homeless, right? They're living in their car, they're couch surfing, they're moving a lot. And that is sort of the housing insecurity piece. Maybe they're securely housed now, but we say they're one emergency away from not being able to pay rent. Car breaks down, someone in their family gets sick, they lose their job moves to part-time hours, suddenly they can't make rent that much, they're facing an eviction. And so we're seeing that more and more people are on that edge of not being able to feel secure in their housing, and then that has mental health and other implications for their household. And so I think it's just really important that when we're talking about housing, it's obviously the technical details and how much housing we're producing and all of these things, but it's also about people's lives and the ability to be able to thrive and show up as a full community member and be a good parent and be a good neighbor. And when you don't have secure housing, it has this huge ripple effect on your life.
Absolutely. I mean, can you talk a little bit about, I know that because the rent prices have gotten so high, a lot of the time people are paying a larger percentage of their income toward housing than would normally be advisable.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what you think the economic impacts of that are? I mean, because if the people are spending, 50% of their income to rent an apartment, they're not spending that excess cash on services or going out to eat or doing anything that would otherwise spur the economy. Am I right?
Absolutely. I mean, so under the federal definition, you are rent burdened if you're paying more than 30% of your income on rent.
Wow.
And a lot of us pay a lot more than that. I've been working with Open Door. These are, healthcare workers who are gainfully employed. 1 in 4 of them reported paying more than 50% of their income on rent. I mean, we did the math a little bit last time. That's not a lot left over to just survive, let alone be able to contribute to the community. And so I think, when we look at the equation around the housing crisis, there's been a real issue with we don't have enough housing. And that's part of what's driving this real jump in prices, is that there's a lot of people who want housing and not enough of it. And so people can charge more and more, right?
Yeah.
But there's the other piece, which is that while housing prices have gone up and up, people's wages haven't.
Yeah.
And so you have this real mismatch between what people are earning and the kind of constantly growing cost of housing, both to rent and to own. And so that's really where we're seeing this moment of crisis. And that's why all these studies are showing that the folks who are falling into homelessness right now, they're older adults and their families.
Yeah.
They're people who were just that one emergency away from potentially facing, housing insecurity and homelessness. And so I think it's just really important to humanize the issue before we get into some of the technical details.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, as a father of 4 and with my wife, we've had moments where we've struggled and where we didn't know where the rent was going to come from, and it's like all of a sudden, all the well-being that you thought you'd accumulated from years of hard work or whatever, it's gone, and you're confronted with this fear, and that ruins so many other aspects of your life.
Yeah.
I know that from personal experience. And the other thing I'd say is that, homelessness is a huge problem, especially in Humboldt County. We have a large number of homeless, but that's a visible problem. And like you were saying, I think that there is a large segment of our population that is struggling with housing issues, whether it's the cost or, even finding a place, or if you have bad credit, getting approved for an apartment, all of which can be stressful and toxic to you, and cause lifestyle impacts.
Yeah.
That stuff doesn't get covered as much.
Absolutely. And you were talking about the consequences of this. I want to speak to another consequence, which is that people leave.
Yeah.
Right. That
right.
it causes displacement, and people have to find communities where they can afford housing. And so California for the first time is starting to see population loss. It's a direct result of our housing crisis. And here in Humboldt, we're also starting to see longtime residents feeling like they don't have a future here because of the price of housing. And when we did a survey with Open Door staff, and this is publicly available, we found that 45% see that housing could be a barrier in the next 5 years to them being able to stay in the community and stay at Open Door.
Wow.
So that's a really big deal, right? So we're not just talking about we're just talking about what does it mean to have an inclusive and welcoming community? Well, affordable housing is a really big part of what makes a community accessible to people.
Yeah, and you look at like Open Door as an organization, not to make this specific to them or anything, but they make decent wages. It's not like they're working at minimum wage or anything. And if they're struggling, I think that's emblematic of how widespread the problem actually is.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, one question I wanted to get at before we get into the the legislation, we're kind of putting it off because it's no fun. But are there pressures particular to Humboldt County that make our situation different or better or worse than what's going on otherwise in California? Yeah,
I would say that there is still, an opportunity here where we're not seeing such intense, speculation in our market yet, where we can really start to put in safeguards around, protecting existing housing. We talk about the 3 Ps. It's tenant protections, it's the preservation of existing housing, and it's the production of new housing. And if we invest in those 3 areas, we're starting to really see a comprehensive solution to the housing crisis. And each of those, have different policy goals and implications. But I think in Humboldt, we have opportunities to really invest in all 3, including preserving our existing housing and making sure that stays, accessible to folks. And so because we're not in a really hot market, it's pretty hot now, and even in the year that we we've last talked, it's increasing. Yes, the prices,
worse, whatever,
the interest is growing, which I think is exciting in some ways, and also requires us to be really creative about making sure that we're putting safeguards in place so that people can continue to afford to live here. And so I think we're a little bit earlier in the crisis than other parts of California, and so I think that's exciting. And I think the other piece is that we have so much like wild and agricultural land that makes this area special. And so I think when we talk about how do we build housing to accommodate our growing population, accommodate simply the people who are already here who cannot find housing, there is kind of a little bit of a moment of reckoning that I think we're coming to about how that housing is going to be built. And the advocates that I work with, a lot of them are environmental organizations who also believe that the housing and environmental crises are interconnected. We really want to see infill housing in areas that are already developed, your downtown Eureka, Arcata, parts of Fortuna and McKinleyville. We want to see increased density and growth there, which means that, what's exciting about that vision of the future is that when you build up a little bit, you can have more transportation that doesn't require cars. You can have lively street life. We've seen it in different pockets. Totally. If we don't allow for infill, this idea of densifying our urban areas, what we're going to see is sprawl. And we're going to see these wild and agricultural lands, turn into tract single-family housing, which is really not the housing of the future. That's the housing of the past. It sort of has failed us. It's become too expensive. It requires cars. It's not inclusive. And so I think we're at a little bit of a moment of like, what is the future of Humboldt? How do we accommodate growth in a way that aligns with our values? And the groups that I'm talking to are really seeing infill as that solution. And so I think when we think about the future, that's really an exciting option to start to densify. And we have abandoned areas and lots that are being underutilized, and I think there are real opportunities to see housing in those spots.
Yeah, I mean, on that local front, there's been an initiative presented in Old Town about parking lots, and there was a plan that was adopted by the city of Eureka, brought by the Dishgamu organization with the Wiyot tribe.
Yes.
I'm going to have a guest next week who's going to speak directly to that issue, but do you have any thoughts on the surface about that proposal and what you're thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have great examples locally of thoughtful planning efforts that are starting to do this infill housing. And so one of the ones that you brought up, which is the Eureka kind of parking lots to housing initiative, super exciting, right? Parking lots are not the highest use of land that is in centrally located areas, and we really, these are areas that could house hundreds of families, right? I mean, that's really exciting. And do it in a way where it has very limited environmental impact because you're already in developed areas. Exactly. And so this is a real opportunity. And so I think I see that as a really promising initiative. The first round of that program, the developer Link Housing just won $30 million from the state of California to build affordable housing. That happened in August, that award. They worked with the city of Eureka to do that. So they're about to build 3 housing on a sort of what they call a scattered site, which is 3 different sites that are now parking lots. They won this $30 million to bring that to this community to build housing. Huge deal. As you said, the Dishgamu Humboldt Community Land Trust, which is connected to the Wiyot tribe, they just won the next bid. So these are really exciting nonprofit developers who are bringing truly affordable housing. I mean, both they're restricted, right? They're going to be for people making 80% of the area median income and below. So this is a big, exciting deal. And in Arcata, we have the Gateway Area Plan, which is also supporting this idea of densifying parts of Arcata to allow for taller development and more affordable housing. So we have really promising initiatives, and I think what we're seeing is when these initiatives are moving forward, there's also a lot of community resistance. And I want to talk about that in a moment because I think it really connects to the CEQA conversation.
It does, and I was going to ask you about that. Exactly.
And kind of why it's important that legislators are starting to think about what is slowing down affordable housing and how are the ways that we can speed up the process so that affordable housing meets less local resistance. And so if you would be okay with that, I'd love to speak to that a little bit. So when I started working in affordable housing, there's that question of like, why is it so hard to build? And there's not one answer, unfortunately. I mean, part of it is that the way that we've financed affordable housing in America right now, it's a really complex process. It involves tax credits. It involves this like really, complex financing model that blends different sources and takes a long time to line up all the pieces. It's expensive to buy land in California. It's it's expensive to build, and so all of these different pieces make it hard to like get to a green light on affordable housing development. But it's happening. I mean, we just got these $30 million that Link got for the parking lots. I mean, it does happen. It just takes a lot of energy. The issue is that here we have a lot of nonprofit developers doing all that work, getting the pieces together, and then all of a sudden they're hitting really intense community resistance.
Yes.
And that adds costs, and that slows projects down, and sometimes that means that they never even happen.
It derails them,
It derails them. And I want to talk about this because I think this is sort of an under-examined piece, but a new study came out from Boston University. A professor there, Professor Einstein, did a survey of 100 different planning commission meetings and looked at who was speaking. And we know this kind of anecdotally, but this was like the first time that I've seen research recently on who. And who's at these meetings? Well, the homeowners are 25% more represented in these meetings, which means that there's a disproportionate representation of homeowners, existing homeowners in these meetings. They're also older. They're white.
So they're skewing politically conservative.
Yes, and they're also housing secure, right? These are people who are housing secure.
Exactly right.
And so she found that in these planning commission meetings, only 15% of comments were in support of affordable housing. But in these same jurisdictions, you would see 56% of the vote going to pro-housing legislation and like ballot measures locally. So we're seeing only 15% of people coming out in support at these meetings, but the majority of the community voting when they can for pro-housing measures. So what we're seeing is that a small minority of vocal, often housing secure neighbors who are worried about their property values or which is actually untrue. Affordable housing in your neighborhood doesn't lower your property values, or they want to keep the character of the neighborhood the same. They're really slowing down, affordable housing development. And I'll speak a little bit to how that's happening in Humboldt, but what I want to talk about with the CEQA legislation and what we're seeing here is CEQA is one of the tools that are being kind of misused.
Basically people have to go through meet these standards in order to build, and people go through and they find what they construe as violations or whatever, and they throw it in front of the planning commissions, and then that can hold things up and ultimately
it's lawsuits, it's more money for the nonprofit developers to move through the process. And I would say that CEQA is actually not necessarily like the boogeyman, as I think the Cal Matters article outlined. It's almost like one of many chinks in a coat of armor that's trying to protect affordable housing to make it through to completion.
Absolutely.
And so, CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, was really intended to make sure that the environmental impacts of a project are being surfaced, right? And that the public and decision makers understand, building in a wetland, that has some really negative impacts. Maybe we don't want to move forward with this project.
Absolutely.
I think in some housing projects, the way that it's being misconstrued is that people are using that framework to sort of slow down affordable housing, not necessarily because they're really concerned about environmental impacts, but because they don't want it in their neighborhood. It's a not in my backyard ethos. And so the highest profile case recently is Berkeley. In UC Berkeley, there's an effort to use People's Park to build affordable housing or student housing, which is much needed there. And local neighbors used CEQA and said that when they did their CEQA analysis of the project, they didn't consider the noise that college students create, and therefore they have to go through and do the process all over again. And that's really not, I think, in the spirit of what this legislation was intended around. And so what we're seeing the state legislature do is really try and put these protections in place so that infill affordable housing development projects don't have to have CEQA be what holds them back.
Because it's principally allowed. It's what it's meant for, right?
Yes,
that's the idea.
The first CEQA exemptions were actually for large stadiums and corporate headquarters, which is like a little like you're like, oh. But if we're exempting CEQA for those projects, then we should definitely exempt them for infill affordable housing,
when
where
it has so many impacts down, and benefits when it's done. Absolutely.
And it's already, by being infill, it's already in a downtown area. So this isn't meaning that we're not building in necessarily environmentally sensitive areas and things like that. I think the fear, and I share this, is that CEQA is an important tool for environmental justice to prevent projects from harming communities and having negative environmental impacts. So I'm not advocating for the repeal of CEQA, even if there's ways to make it better. But I think in this case, it's just one of many tools that we can use to make sure that what Einstein calls the politics of delay, which is that when people are just trying to put barriers in front of affordable housing just to make it go slower, to make it less likely to happen, what the legislator is trying to do with this piecemeal of chain armor, as Cal Matters calls it, is to just make sure that those projects have more strength to move through and get built.
So I guess that answers the question then. I mean, do you think there's any environmental risks from this? You'd say no, because that's not really where the issue lies. Is that correct?
I would say that the way that it's written now, that it's focusing on 100% affordable housing in infill areas, I would say that that's pretty limited, and that the examples that we're seeing of people bringing CEQA lawsuits against these types of projects are really about obstruction. They're not necessarily about environmental concerns.
Yeah.
But I would like to speak locally to a few of the ways in which we're seeing this politics of delay, so to speak, happen here in Humboldt. And with the Gateway,
we've got about 3 minutes left.
Okay, I can be fast. So with the Gateway Area Plan, it's been this very long process. So
Arcata,
Arcata identified housing as their number one concern. The city worked to come up with this plan to increase density and build more affordable housing, and now it's been this 2-year, very long process of trying to get that new zoning regulation instituted, and it's still not confirmed. And so I think we're seeing here the politics of delay, a few very loud voices, and some very valid concerns, but it's this idea of a trade-off and how fast can we move to get to address this crisis that we're all hurting from. And so that's the kind of Gateway Area Plan. I would say in Eureka, we're seeing a more concerning trend, I would argue, with the Rob Arkley-backed, mislabeled Housing for All ballot measure that they've been trying to put on the ballot.
We had someone in talking about it a little while ago.
Great.
And next week we will as well.
And that's also the politics of day. So that's actually trying to target that project, Link Housing project, that's converting parking lots to housing. They're saying we don't want to see that move forward, and that would put that $30 million in jeopardy. It would put almost 200 units of future housing in jeopardy. And so we're seeing even locally this, maybe they're not using CEQA, but it's local actors, often who are very housing secure, slowing down the process of creating really much needed new affordable housing.
Yeah. We have about 90 seconds left. Real quick, one of the things that bothers me about this whole topic is that in our society, we view real estate and owning a house or buying a house or where you live as more speculation, wealth generation, than actually just supplying quality places of live. Is there any hope for us to dial that back, or are we permanently on that path?
I'm so glad you asked this, James, because this is actually, after years of working in housing, this is my dream, which is that we move towards a future where what we call decommodify housing. And this might sound a little bit radical to folks, but really seeing housing not as an economic good that should be traded, that is now owned by venture capitalist firms, but is really something that is a right for everybody. And as we move there are tools that we're seeing, and Dishkama, the community land trust model that they're using, is one of them, where you say this housing shouldn't be speculative, right? It shouldn't be about generating wealth for your family. It should be about making sure everyone has a place to live. And so community land trusts and other tools like that take housing out of the commodity market and start to make it a right and a guarantee for folks. So I'm really hopeful around projects like that. And I think that really, if we're, all of this chink mail, this armor, that we're getting towards, it's not really going to solve the problem unless we also work towards decommodifying housing and more kind of root cause ways of thinking about housing differently in our communities.
Yeah, it's like the approach is wrong, and if the approach is wrong, then you're always going to end up in a bad place unless you figure out how to make your values different.
Exactly.
I think where we're headed. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, thank you. What a treat.
Once again, you're brilliant.
Thanks.
So I appreciate you clearing it up for us.
Yes, awesome. Thank you.
That's it for tonight. Thanks you for joining us. Remember, stay tuned and stay informed.